Thanks for joining us today. This webinar is brought to you by Test Evolve, the one-stop solution for fast and effective automated agile testing for desktop, mobile and API. With support for JavaScript, TypeScript and Ruby, Test Evolve provides you with test creation accelerators, real-time test result reporting with detailed insights, accessibility and lighthouse auditing, and exploratory testing capture. For a fully featured free 30-day trial, please visit testevolve.com. Enjoy today's session and please like and subscribe for regular updates. Good evening, guys. Welcome to the webinar. We're talking tonight about the concept of whether or not learning to code makes you a better tester. Does it make you a better tester? Can it make you a better tester? Along the way, we're going to explore some myths, some opinions, try and find some objective examples with a view to answering some of these questions, right? Is it a must for modern testers as we go into 2025, software testing in IT? How does it help with your test coverage, your test design, your critical thinking, if at all? Is it a necessary skill, a helpful skill, or just an overhyped requirement that is now just rife within every software testing job ad that we see from a recruitment perspective? Does it help us think like our developers, align with our developers, I guess both front end and back end developers on your team? And ultimately, does it make you more marketable? Does it help you future-proof and ensure your career, shall we say? So spoiler straight away, my opinion on this is 100% that yes, it absolutely does. No question about that. Let's just spend some time qualifying what we might mean by better, though. All right, maybe more well-rounded, a tester that can add more value, provide a better service. These are things that I would think of as being that determination of what better might actually be. So, I sat here and thought about some questions that I would ask myself as my career has taken a turn. So yes, are my technical skills improved? Much so, without a doubt. Can I lead a team by example now? What do I mean by that? Can I roll my sleeves up and actually get into the code and start writing code myself? Can I contribute as part of that team? So the idea of hands-on test management, if you like, yeah, absolutely. Has it helped me to assess risk more accurately by having learnt to code and by having an awareness of code? Without question, definitely. I can have much better, more informed, more holistic conversations now with the people on my team, with the developers on my team. All manner of technical colleagues, architects, project managers, front-end, back-end developers, about the solution, about the new features, about the testing that's required, about the approaches to testing, about troubleshooting the issues. Yeah, absolutely. It has helped me spot gaps in requirements, for sure, by looking through code, looking at code reviews. So that is a skill in itself. And I do not think I would be operating in the kind of agile world that I am today without having taken those steps into the coding world, if you like. So I do think it's very, very hard to probably embrace the idea of being on an agile team, but not having some code awareness or some coding skills yourselves as a tester. In terms of diagnosis now, so when I think I've found an issue and it's likely to be a bug, actually I'm able to now dive a little deeper before I throw it straight over the fence to the developers. I can start to look through the code and understand where the issues may be. The test that I just executed that's followed a certain path, a certain user journey, a certain path through the code. Is that now clear to me? Does it help me to kind of pre-identify the likely cause of that issue? So when I do raise a potential bug, I can add a lot more meaningful information to it. Yeah, absolutely. And certainly the willingness to step into a world of coding and primarily automation, that's what we're talking about here, has led me more confidently into things like performance testing, accessibility, security, and certainly API testing as well, to varying extents. But it certainly opened the doors to those. Maybe they wouldn't have been parts of my journey that I was willing to embrace had I not first started with some basic coding and some functional automation. I think I can have much more joined up conversations with customers if I can bridge the gap between the core delivery team and facing off to the customer. It's certainly helped in that regard. And I think in terms of when we talk about automation, the automation pyramid and the ability to free up some much needed time to do some exploratory testing on above and beyond your automation, an awareness of the code and the implementation has certainly helped me with more targeted, proactive, effective exploratory testing, which has yielded better results and probably found more bugs through more edge case probing, etc. Having said all of that, is it absolutely mandatory for a career in software testing? No, definitely not. I think ultimately it's something you will want to embrace. I think you'll enjoy the challenge. You'll enjoy the journey that it will take you on. But there are plenty of examples, the first half of my career included, of where coding was not part of that testing career. And if you search long enough on the net, you'll see these opinions. But no, you can have a career in testing without coding. But the very real truth, probably the reality, is that your testing career, your skill set, your enjoyment, your relationship with your colleagues will be much enhanced if you do decide to go on that coding journey. All right, so just by way of source material, so when I was looking at the webinar today, I've been trawling through some LinkedIn, some testing communities, looking at some YouTube articles, of course. There are some great testing communities in Reddit, so I've been trawling around there, finding some opinions, some examples. Ministry of Testing is a fantastic site, a fantastic resource, of course, for all things testing. You should definitely be spending some of your R&D time in there. I've dipped into the Microsoft community. I've looked at numerous personal blogs from small and large testing influencers in the community. I've asked ChatGPT, of course, for its opinion, and I've trawled through the page one search results from Google to try and bring you some relevant, up-to-date and meaningful source content. So hopefully that will come across. And I think I come from a position of reasonable experience now. So my own journey, approaching 25 years in testing now, if you can believe that. I began in 2000. Really, so far it's been a career of two halves. The first 12 years, very much traditional, quote unquote, traditional waterfall-based testing through a range of roles from entry-level tester to senior tester, test lead, eventually test consultant, with a lot of work with offshore teams as well, offshore, nearshore teams in kind of coordination roles. That was really the first half, the first 12 years. And the last 12 years has been really the mirror image of that. It's been very much in the agile space, primarily over three roles, starting 12 years ago with test management, moving into test directing or head of testing, and now more so in the product development and the product officer space. But the key difference being the last 12 years, it's all been agile and it's all had hands-on automation as well, largely at my insistence, through wanting to further develop, retain those skills, but also to be part of the team, leading by example, or as I said earlier, rolling your sleeves up and playing your part. That was important to me. So test manager, head of testing, product officer, these are all roles that can be done without hands-on work, without automation, but that wasn't the path that I chose. I made it an active part of what I wanted to do. In terms of the verticals, the industry, so I started in UK retail banking, very much in a manual UAT role. The common approach from being seconded from the business into a user acceptance testing team for a particular delivery. In this case, it was a large-scale migration from one retail credit card mainframe platform to another. I then moved into that from a permanent role. I did some contracting roles. Eventually ended up in test consultancy. There I had customers around the country that I would engage with for anywhere between 2 weeks and 4 years. So when I started in retail banking, it was RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland, Lloyds, Department of Trade and Industry, Fujitsu. 4 years down with Virgin Atlantic, a couple of years with McDonald's UKIT in London. So all very different, very varied, all very enjoyable for different reasons. And then the second half of my career to date has been, as I say, in that kind of test management, head of testing, product officer role since 2013. But that has been a completely different industry, all e-commerce, all agile, and all with automation focus as well, with the requirement I placed on myself to learn to code. All right. And some customers that we work with there, people like Lego, Burberry, IKEA, Laura Ashley, Primark, Comics, Mars. So UK, European, and US type customers there. So what I bring to you today is really my opinion from that history, that career trajectory, if you like, alongside the research that I've been doing. And that's what we're going to look at shortly. But let's dive into it. Let's look at the first kind of category, if we like, and that of relationships and collaboration with your technical colleagues. You're going to find that if you do start to learn to code, you embrace coding as a tester, there are numerous benefits in working relationships with your team. So let's consider the idea of much enhanced collaboration to start with. So your newly found coding skills are going to enable you to communicate much more effectively with developers. Okay, looking through the code, raising bugs, understanding the application logic a little bit more. So it's going to generate some technical discussions where you can play a much more active role. You're going to work more collectively as a team, and you're going to be able to work towards these shared goals more effectively as a team. Okay, so that aspect of collaboration is much enhanced. When it comes to your testing, your test approach, with your own coding journey, shall we say, as you sit there and you work more closely with developers, it's going to give you it's going to allow you to develop a much deeper understanding of the applications under test, the things that you're testing on a daily basis from both a front end and a back end perspective. Okay, so having a knowledge of some programming languages, whether it's JavaScript or Java or maybe Kotlin or Ruby, TypeScript, whatever it's going to be, is going to allow you to have a bit more of an understanding of the production code base, a much greater awareness of the development and the release processes, and a number of broader technical concepts. Okay, and all of these collectively allow you to identify and troubleshoot issues a lot earlier than you would do if you didn't have some coding knowledge, if you hadn't learned to code as a tester. Okay. When you're working with your developers, let's assume you do have aspirations to move towards a more agile way of working. You want to be on a small delivery team, and you're delivering things quickly. You're making products. You're delivering, potentially releasing them to production on a frequent cadence. This agile way of working. With some coding skills behind you, you can make a much more active contribution. Right, start to look at how you can add massive value as a tester by asking more empowered questions, because they're coming from a place of some experience now, whilst you potentially explore the code logic. Right, so learning to code is going to facilitate you taking that more active role in delivery. Now that may be, and most likely it's going to start with test automation. Right, it's the obvious candidate to start your coding journey within. But what you can also do, and there's a reason I've highlighted this in blue here, is because it's such a potential opportunity to add to your knowledge when it comes to your testing, is the idea of code reviews. Okay, so whether that's you having written some automation code, and working with other testers and having those testers review your code, or vice versa, you're actually reviewing the automation code of other testers on your project. That's a fantastic experience to broaden your knowledge, your technical techniques that you might start to introduce within your code. but also pairing with developers. All right, so you can have a developer potentially review, again from a different perspective. It's not from a tester's perspective at that point, but have a developer review some of your automation code, because the chances are, depending on the type of organization you're in or the project that you're on, the developers have probably written some test automation code as well. But it just takes you out of this silo. Okay, especially when you're learning as well. When you first start to learn and start to code, there's never a better time than getting another set of eyes on the code that you've written, and you looking at other people's code to see how a different person has approached a similar problem. All right, so code reviews are fantastic vehicles to upskill you when it comes to your coding knowledge, and then in turn the payoffs in your approach to testing are much enhanced as well. It means you can really start to actively contribute to some very technical testing discussions, because it won't always just be UI. And of course, if you're looking at headless delivery, you may just be dealing with APIs, REST services to start with, microservices. So your newfound coding skills, if you go on this journey, may be contributing to the automation of API testing before that front end is in existence. So code reviews are a fantastic vehicle to give you this extra knowledge, this extra skill. And then that all aids with your professional growth. Okay, so coding provides you a pathway to start to think like a developer. Let's dispel this myth immediately that automation code is secondhand code. This is every bit as important as production code in some respects. Okay, so it starts to allow you to explore this developer mindset. You should have pride in your code, right? Your code should have integrity. That you should look to improve it with every commit that you make, and this should enrich your testing role and certainly broaden your career opportunities. Let's talk about the career side of things. Securing a future for yourself, if you like, or even just creating more opportunities for yourself. Ultimately you've got to enjoy what you do as well. All right, so in the realms of career growth and opportunities, learning to code is going to open doors to you for sure when it comes to roles like SDET, so software development, engineering, test, and potential integration into DevOps or Dev Test Ops teams. If that's where you see yourself potentially, learning to code is going to be a springboard into these types of roles that you might find very difficult without some coding skills. So we start to branch off from traditional testing, but roles where some real core testing skills are still at the foundation of being able to do that role. Okay. And of course, as you upskill, as you broaden your knowledge, your coding skills, as you start to embrace more challenges, traditionally higher salaries are going to come, and they're going to align with a wider and a deeper skill set. That's proven time and time again, and we'll look at some example jobs on the market right now in just a second. Now that may be important to you, of course, but this is certainly going to help with that. If you're undecided on whether coding's for you, it doesn't mean there is no path for you, right? So if you're maybe, let's say you're 4 to 5 years into a testing career and you're just so happen to be in an organization, maybe a small organization, not high levels of automation, or for whatever reason that's not been your path till now, and either you don't know how you're going to get into it, or you're not sure if it's for you, there is still a path, a more traditional path. And what you would probably want to look at is focusing on, how do I get into a test management kind of capacity sooner rather than later, because as I say, that's a role that I've done. It's a role that can be done without being a hands-on automation engineer. Of course, you can be a test manager, a very good test manager, but it depends. Is the fit right for you? Okay, so there are roles and progression paths without learning to code. Okay, you have to consider the industry trends and demands, things that are happening right now as we go into 2025. If you do look around, generally speaking, roles are going to fall into kind of 3 categories. You're looking at automation heavy roles, so where that's the majority of the role on a day-to-day basis. There are not nearly as much, but there are some all-rounder type quality advocate roles to be filled out there in the market. And then there are the kind of entry level positions, if you like. So first, junior tester, first time testing roles as you come out of college potentially, or potentially you're looking at a career change. But very much, what we see at the moment is that agile practices, rapid delivery are very much at the heart of most organizations at the moment, even in more traditional verticals as well, in finance, insurance, medical industry. Things are moving that way, and as I said earlier, it's going to be hard to be active in an agile role without some coding skills, I believe. The industry, the market generally is looking for adaptable testers, people that are willing to self-study, upskill. They're not afraid of change. They want to embrace modern tools, modern ways of working. That's what we tend to see within the industry right now. So let's think about the importance of coding knowledge for your future growth, if you like. So teams themselves are changing as well. Team structures are changing. The nature of roles within delivery teams are changing. We have teams where people wear many hats for good reason. Sometimes it's just needed. You're a small team. You all have to chip in and do different bits and pieces as the team matures, as time passes. But you can remain increasingly relevant when you are willing to be part of that evolving team yourself, right? And we are very much, as we just said, we're in industries where agile time to market is absolutely paramount, and that's the kind of situation where quality is important. Everybody acknowledges that, but we can't have testing as a bottleneck to that process. So where you can start to use your coding skills, predominantly in the automation space, that's going to be good for your team, good for you. Right? Automation is a development task. Okay, so your coding proficiency, your coding skills that you build are going to bridge gaps between QA and dev, testing and dev, in the same way that you can have those conversations with the customer as well. So let's make no bones about it. Automation, certainly with I think we're talking really about coded frameworks here. So you might be looking at JavaScript, TypeScript, Ruby, with Selenium, for example. You could be looking at Cypress, Playwright as frameworks of choice. But they are all coded frameworks, sometimes with their own syntax, as opposed to some of our SaaS-based codeless tool offerings on the market, if you like. If you're writing code and it's automation code, it's still a development task in the sense that you want to be introducing and maintaining those best coding practices. And again, coming back to our review process, that's going to come out from the time you spend with developers and testing peers, reviewing your code and you reviewing their code. So it has to be taken seriously and the quality has to be high. Ultimately, this is optional, right? Learning to code is optional. There is a career without it, but you are going to become increasingly more valuable. You're going to be able to stand out above your peers if you do reach for more, if you do decide that this is for you. Okay. Tech's changing rapidly, of course. The roles and the responsibilities to support that are changing rapidly as well. So being a tester on a team who is able to be flexible and having resilience, I should say, are going to be key to your ongoing relevance, your longevity, your ability to thrive in an ever-changing market with ever-changing products and ever increasingly demanding customers. So as tech changes, you need to be able to adapt and change and assume more responsibilities as much as you can, really. Teams are increasingly looking at automation skills not only as desirable now in terms of a job spec and what they're looking for from a candidate, but for most people it's going to be there as a mandatory skill or a must-have piece of experience, ideally. Now, obviously, the interview process for different roles is going to shake out as to what that really means, and you start to see the maturity of organisations. But in terms of, when people put a job spec up, what they're looking for, or what they're telling you they're looking for, is the best version of a potential candidate. And the best version of a potential candidate for most roles is now going to have some automation skills. If you don't currently have those, certainly, the ability to demonstrate a massive appetite for personal growth, personal improvement, is going to stand out to people that are building teams and actively hiring. All right. Now, the more traditional approach, the non-coding approach to testing, the non-coders within the testing community, absolutely have a vital contribution to make, of course. We continue to talk about, we've talked about it on our webinars many times, the necessity and the value that comes from exploratory testing. Now, that's not automation, that's not coding. It is heuristic, human-led, on-the-fly testing, but that's the piece that's going to usually uncover some of your worst offending bugs. But we've already seen, and we will continue to see, how having some coding skills and awareness of the application under test, more of a white box or a glass box approach to testing, can massively enhance your exploratory testing as well. So even though it itself is a kind of a manual form of testing, it can be further enhanced by the coding skills that you do develop alongside it. Okay, and again, very much to make the point, there is absolutely a path for testers in IT that don't want to write code. There'll be fewer and far between, for sure. And you're going to have to make your presence felt in other ways. All right, and that's where the critical thinking piece comes into it. That's when it becomes more than just digesting requirements and thinking in terms of positive test cases and negative test cases. Anyhow, let's just to prove the point, let's look at some in-flight job ads right now. Let's just look at what the market is asking for. All right, so no particular agenda. Let's have a scroll through these. All right, so here's a test consultant. Let's start with this one. Fairly light on detail, but all right. Global retailer, QA technical tester. So maybe the clue's in the title there. Technical tester. Hybrid role, high aspirations there, error free, good luck with that. But the first thing I notice here, so unit testing, well, that's not a manual exercise. This is very much part of the development process. So expectations of unit testing experience, slightly interesting requirement for a technical testing role there, but that's okay. Acceptance testing experience, no mention of tooling at this point, so there you go. So this one actually not highly automation focused, albeit it does refer to unit testing. Let's go back. Let's have a look at something else on this particular site. We'll do a senior test analyst, financial by the look of it, City of London. Let's see what we have in here. So some typical things: responsibilities, planning, strategy, design, execution. Yeah, we see this. There you go. Number 3, automation. So partner with the automation team, design, implement, maintain automated test scripts. Okay, let's see if it gets a little bit more explicit. 5 years in testing, expertise in manual and automated testing, market or industry knowledge, and then some name-checked particular tools. So Selenium, QTP, Quick Test, Professional, TestNG, and then actually some mention of languages as well. So Java, Python, JavaScript, or SQL. There you go. So definite focus on automation for that senior test analyst role. Let's just look at let's have a look at, we'll look at both of these. An Oracle Fusion role. Let's just try and highlight very quickly if there's any automation requirements. Let's have a look. Functional testing, exploratory testing. Okay, good to see that. No explicit mention of automation just yet, I don't think. Risk-based testing techniques, of course. Interesting. I think that one is light on automation. Let's check one more here. Legal 3E. Let's have a look. I think I saw RPA straight away there, so that gives me an indication. RPA, so robotics process automation. DevOps, yeah, keywords are going to suggest high levels of automation required. Let's see. Five years of functional system integration, end-to-end UAT, strong background, defect management. No, interesting. So it would suggest that levels of automation required, but not explicitly asked for, as far as I can see. Exploratory and risk-based testing. There you go. Interesting. All right, moving on. Another website. Let's have a quick look. This is Ministry of Testing. So let's have a look at someone looking for their first software testing role. Let's have a quick look. Digital Native UK, an apprenticeship providing recruiting. Okay, what are we looking for here? Test automation using the Playwright framework. So throughout your apprenticeship, you'll receive training and tooling encompassing the creation of test automation using the Playwright framework. So a good entry-level role for someone with a clear path on what the training is going to provide. So Playwright automation there. Let's look at QA engineer here. No, it's not working. All right, let's try this first one. Okay, QA testing, project implementation, assurance lead, mobile and web apps. Accessibility testing, interesting, good to see that. That's increasingly important as well. WCAG, ADA. Right, qualifications, proven experience as a tester, mobile and web application environments, strong knowledge of end-to-end, accessibility, manual cross-browser testing and real device testing. Right, so this one's asking for familiarity with test automation tools. So it would suggest that a level of awareness, familiarity, not necessarily 3 to 5 years worth of experience required in this particular role. So reference to it, but not a strict requirement necessarily. All right, moving on. Let's have a look. Let's look at a junior role. Junior software test analyst. Here we go. So, junior test analyst to join the engineering team. Writing scripts, test spec documents, manual scripts, executing automated scripts. Interesting. So maybe there's an existing framework in place and the introduction to this is going to be through the execution and the analysis of automation, of automated tests, but not necessarily the creating of them. And let's just check essential skills. Yeah, this tends to focus on the more manual side of things right now. Desirable skills, there we go. So using automated testing tools for server web applications. And then we get into specifics. So these are things that they would like, but not things that are mandatory. Selenium, Cypress, Playwright. HP, ALM, Quality Center, X-Ray, Security, and pen testing. Well, that's a lot for an entry role, but there you go. So reference to it, but again, not an explicit requirement for an entry role. Let's look at this. Early in career software quality assurance test engineer. Last one we'll look at here. As a QA engineer, you'll play a crucial role in ensuring the highest quality of products, testing operating systems, etc., etc. Applying standard practices with a quality-first mentality in an agile team. Passion for mobile desktop technologies. Minimum qualifications for this role. Okay, so some coding experience expected. Scripting languages, JavaScript and Python. Preferred qualifications for the role. Test framework, so that's going to be automation. Experience of QA automation tools. Experience with iOS, Android, Windows and Mac operating systems. There you go. So that's just a bit of a walkthrough of what's out there on the market at the moment. But clearly, I guess the more senior roles are having very clear requirements of maybe years' experience of what they would need automation-wise from certain roles, certain tools, certain preferences for languages. Other roles there seem to highlight the fact that you can come in and maybe execute and analyze failures from the existing framework, but possibly not write code. And then some of the other entry roles there would suggest that there was a definite training program, but that learning to code would be part of that path for people. So you can see an assortment of different things there. But clearly there is some room on the market for testing roles that don't explicitly mention coding as well. So we still see both there. So that's what the market tells us. Let's consider what learning to code may do for your technical skills, your analysis skills, your ability to troubleshoot. So starting with root cause analysis. So I think when you suspect that you found a bug in your testing, your awareness of code, learning to code, is going to allow you to analyze things a little bit more proactively. So again, as we say before, throwing bugs over the fence, potential bugs over the fence to developers immediately is the ability for you to be as sure as you can that this is definitely an issue because you have an awareness of the code. All right, you've already looked at it partially through the eyes of a developer, so it's going to help you to perform that RCA, that root cause analysis, if you like. And then your familiarity with one or more languages, whether that's something like JavaScript or something like Ruby, it's definitely going to enhance your knowledge, your awareness, your understanding of error messages that crop up in your testing. It's going to allow you to grep the logs a little bit more proactively, to understand what's happening as you test the application. And then to diagnose these issues more accurately, as again, really with the focus of being as sure as you can that is definitely a bug or something's definitely regressed. So you have just better defect awareness, if you like. So all of this allows you to find things at the earliest possible opportunity as well. So this coding knowledge that gives you these extra insights. Again, coming back to the review, if you're actively involved in reviews, you're sitting there with the dev beside you, you're looking through a pull request in GitHub, for example, and you're actually following the flow of the logic through the code, and you have an awareness of the requirement alongside that, you have a good chance of actually, and of course this is what code reviews are for, or part of what code reviews are for, to actually identify the fact that particular bit of code is either has a problem, or it's not going to resolve correctly, or it's not going to deliver the requirement. So this is the idea that we find bugs at review stage before we've even deployed that code to the environment. All right, so these improved debugging skills will help you identify these code level bugs proactively at the earliest stage that you can. You're going to be much more confident working within and having a handle on technical environments if you have adopted some coding skills. You've started to learn to code. And you're going to get quicker at resolving issues, I think, when you have a deeper insight into the technical challenges, or what the code is actually telling you, what you see, the debugging processes. Your speed of resolution or raising bugs at the earliest stage is going to be much enhanced. All right, and then I think ultimately with the detail that you put into your bugs. So if you were testing an API, for example, rather than simply saying I tried this and it failed, you've got a much better chance of writing an effective bug report that maybe talks about the endpoint. It talks about the method that was used. Was it a post, a get, a patch, a delete request, etc. The body of the request that was being passed. Any headers that were being passed. What the response code that came back, for example. That's a much more technical level of information that you can then add to your bug reports, when you find something wrong. But your ability to do that is going to be enhanced by your coding skills if you start to learn to code yourself. API testing is never a black box exercise, if you like. It always requires more of a technical understanding to be able to do API testing, even if just with a tool like Postman, for example, but then with the idea of writing automated API tests as well with a coded framework using JavaScript or using Ruby is going to require some coding skills. But yeah, collectively, this is going to allow you to raise much better quality, much more understandable bugs, whereby you've already done a good level of root cause analysis as well. So let's talk about some critical thinking. Let's talk about some better test design, if you like. So we'll start with requirements. We, as testers, we like to think that we are always going to have a fantastic set of complete requirements. And as much as we push for that, it's not always going to be the case. It's very unlikely in all situations you're going to have a perfect set of requirements. And the reason I'm making that point is that, someone who's maybe not learning to code would likely make the argument that all I need to really refer to is the requirement from the business, the senior stakeholder. Our experience tells us that when you are looking at a new greenfield development, brand new features, new customer functions, you will probably get very, very good requirements for that. That's the latest, greatest thing. That's the thing that the marketing team are very excited about. People are more likely to go to the lengths of creating good quality requirements for new functionality than they are older functionality that's potentially being refactored for whatever reason. So we're not always going to get these perfect requirements, okay? And so having an awareness of the code, having the ability to code, gives us another pillar with which to refer against, if you like. We can actually use our knowledge of the requirements alongside now our knowledge of the code, alongside our knowledge of how the customers are likely to use the application. We'll talk about that in a second. Let's talk about the role of coding in testing. So in a way, if you think about it, testing code without understanding it potentially undermines the effectiveness of your testing. The requirement is one thing, but actually you'll find within the code that there will often be things that weren't necessarily a requirement or weren't asked for, but actually your ability to understand that means that you can design sufficient test coverage to prove it, to a good enough level. So your coding skills in this role enable precise, good coverage and meaningful testing. At its best, automation is really we call it automated checking. If we're going to get very specific about what automation versus heuristic testing means, humans test, they ask questions, they explore, they design tests, and they execute concurrently. That's really what exploratory testing is all about. Automation, at best, with well-written code, is automated checking either of positive or negative conditions after having conditioned the application to be in a certain state. But your exploratory testing is going to be much enhanced, allowing you to probe the application a little deeper, apply some more complex testing methods if you do have some coding skills. All right. So that familiarity, tongue twister, with some of these development concepts will help you to create more advanced testing scenarios. And potentially to start getting you into security performance, certainly API testing. If you have an understanding of some logic, particular a loop within the code that could have a number of outcomes, you need to be able to sufficiently design tests to cover those. The requirements and that may not cover all of it, but your understanding of that code can allow you to test it thoroughly. So think of it in that way. Proactive risk identification. So testers who can read and interpret code can definitely proactively identify risks. And again, that may come from that code review. It's going to allow you to see some of the system boundaries, the integrations, the hotspots potentially, especially if you're seeing some refactored code. If you see a large scale change going into an area of code that has traditionally been problematic or has previously been the cause of production bugs in the past, your ability to read the code and understand it is going to allow you to analyze risks and prioritize more targeted testing in these high risk areas than if you didn't have that knowledge or the ability to read and understand the code. So giving you a good chance really there to reduce the critical defects as much as you can. And I do think when you do start to code, and you do that through automation as a first vehicle potentially, when you start to think in terms of with some of these design patterns, so if you think of something called the page object model and you start to logically break the application under test down into chunks, pages of functionality, large functions within pages, again, I think that sharpens your mind into the focus of each of those areas and what should be done on those pages, what should be done within those components, what are the positive flows, what are the negative flows. It allows you to not only think about the breadth and the width and of the application, the kind of the end-to-end user journeys, but specifically within large chunks of functionality, you can design targeted testing around those as well. And again, your automated test design then kind of leads into your thought, your exploratory testing strategies as well. So definitely understanding code is going to drive testability and coverage. So it's definitely going to optimize your test effort. But let's just touch on this exploratory testing idea again. All right, let's just skip forward one slide. We talk about these pillars, and just coming back to the idea that we're never always going to have perfect requirements. So we have stakeholder requirements. If we start to learn to code, we now have code awareness as well. Okay, and if we use our kind of critical thinking, heuristic, exploratory testing mindset as well, coupled with maybe application analytics, we can have an awareness of what 80% of our customer base are doing with that application. Or if we're building a new application and we have experience of how users are using competitor market products on the market, we have that user flow awareness as well. So where you are light on requirements, an awareness of the code can bolster that testing prowess, if you like. But it's these three things together that are going to allow you to come up with an accurate risk profile for this feature that's being developed, and the justified test focus based upon that risk. One of the key things when you're risk scoring something is this idea of probability. And if you know what the customers are likely to do, what 80% of the customers are going to spend most of their time doing, if you have a good handle on the stakeholder requirements, and you have an awareness of the code, you can see where changes are being made to the code or where new features are being added. You can have, only by having those three things really do you come up with the best risk profile that you can, and only by having that can you then have the most optimized testing approach, with both your across the board really, from your unit testing through to your integration and your service level testing through to your UI automation, and then with your exploratory testing on top of that. But a firm grasp of each of those three things gives you a very accurate risk profile and a very good argument as to why you are choosing to test in a certain way, if called upon to justify it. Okay. Let's focus on this concept of, can coding make you better? I started this webinar by suggesting that better could be, how can you add most value as a tester? All right. So how can you contribute in a more meaningful way to your agile team? Okay. Well, certainly mastering automation is definitely a stepping stone to achieving that. Every agile team is going to need the design and execution of automated tests. They're going to need enhanced test coverage. The tests need to be effective. They need to do a job. And by you learning to code and being part of that, we can absolutely improve sprint output and capacity and bandwidth at the same time. Okay. So as we say, automation is definitely development. We need to make a distinction between being someone who can copy and paste and fix a failing test, as opposed to someone who wants to upskill and learn coding properly so that they can be the person that maintains a growing suite of tests over a 2-year delivery, if needs be. Very, very different things. Many people can fix a failing test or write some spaghetti code, but what you need is low maintenance, effective automation test code for the foreseeable future. Now, your coding skills will also allow you to look at other things as well, like some test data generation, environment configuration, all right, many other things that your newfound coding skills can be useful for. In terms of the wider team itself and agile and DevOps practices, learning to code, your coding skills are going to align with agile principles. There is this focus on automation, adaptability, as we say, but it does mean your code awareness allowing you to prioritize that higher value exploratory testing over more more traditional requirements-led kind of manual testing. There's much higher value from someone on the team that can write code and also do very effective exploratory testing than there is over someone who's probably just relying on a kind of traditional step-by-step positive test script or maybe a negative test script. All right, so we're talking about being more effective. Having those two skills in your tool set much more useful to the wider team. Whenever we have multi-skilled people on the team, you're always going to get a much higher return on your testing investment at a company level. And as we're talking about before, awareness of the code is going to make sure you can target your exploratory testing. There is no point doing endless, exhaustive exploratory testing if you are trying to trigger conditions which can physically never exist in the application. And that's the kind of thing where developers are going to get frustrated. Potentially, the time of delivery is going to be elongated unnecessarily. Code awareness, learning to code, is going to sharpen your skill set when it comes to being effective with all aspects of your testing. When it comes to team relationships and bridging the gap with the customer as well, you as a technical tester with coding skills can bridge the gap between the customer and your delivery team very, very effectively, right? You can be that intermediary. You understand the code, you can write code, and you understand the product and the customer requirements. You are one of the best placed people on the team to align with the customer and have those discussions and demonstrate quality coverage when asked to do so. All right, so in that sense, you have the opportunity to add unique value to your team, with that collaboration improvement. In terms of team leadership and career growth, so at no point are we saying here that we abandon the idea of manual testing or exploratory testing. Okay, learning to code will complement all of your other core testing skills. As a test lead or as a test manager, you have the opportunity by learning to code to still be very, very hands-on and be an active member of the testing or the testers within the delivery team. And as we said earlier, rolling your sleeves up and actually getting on and writing some tests yourself. And in my humble opinion, you're going to have a much better relationship, better type of conversation with everyone on your team when you can provide the same service as well as your other responsibilities, your senior responsibilities of being a manager or a lead. All right, so it's bringing these skills together to make you as effective as you can be. Companies often look for internal candidates primarily for promotions, and having versatile team members that are logical candidates for those roles with these dual skill sets, testing and coding, is a win-win for everybody. And purely from a platform point of view, when you can start to then expand your coding skills, your automation across, desktop, mobile, and API, which is pretty much in everything these days, you are massively adding to your versatility and your value as an agile tester. Okay, and for the longer term, even though we're talking about agile, we're talking about fast cycles, fast cadence and delivery, there is still a longer term or a bigger picture in mind here, and that really should be of within your organization is building a sustainable, repeatable testing practice approach strategy from one delivery to the next, and you achieve that with a focus on maintaining, adding efficiencies to your test packs over time, the code reviews, making sure the code has integrity, it's well written, it's maintainable, everything we talked about. These kind of teams will thrive when you do have a technical tester who can bridge that gap, who can tackle automation, but see the bigger picture in mind. Ensure that the maintenance of the automation tests is implemented in the right way. All right, we'll certainly see a increased sprint capacity and output from sprints. Probably the achieving of more points, which your Scrum Master, your project manager will always be happy about. But again, you only really get to do that when you can wear more hats and you can add more value by having these dual skill sets. So as we say, this doesn't mean at any stage you are abandoning your core testing. Learning to code in this respect and agile automation are just really another testing tool, another testing approach in your testing toolkit, if you like. So really, is now the best time to embrace it? Well, I think absolutely. Okay, with everything that's going on with AI right now, for example, it's in everything we do. AI is, as we say here, shaping the landscape. In terms of learning to code, it can certainly help you to accelerate that learning journey, and it can make skills from the testers in the organization with coding skills even more valuable when you come to start integrating potentially the use of AI into your testing practice, your testing tools. All right, so automation is a tool, it's not the goal. It's important to understand that, but in terms of learning to code, starting with automation in the testing world makes absolute sense. So again, we're talking about coded frameworks. You don't have to be the best coder on the team to be able to make a positive contribution in the automation. Okay, all right. Having some basic JavaScript or Ruby or TypeScript skills are often enough to still be able to write good tests with good integrity by working in a team, looking at the patterns and the modules of code that already exist in the code base and making reuse of that, but by understanding them, employing them in the right way. As with most things, the hardest part is going to be getting started, but in the world we're in right now, with the tools at our disposal, the source content, the books, the online tutorials, the academies, the boot camps, the use of AI, has there ever been a better time to try and get started with this? I mean, there can't possibly have been. All right. So from a testing point of view, probably learning to code within a coded automation framework is going to give you the most significant growth to take those first steps to becoming a more modern agile tester. All right. It is probably going to be difficult to make strides in an agile world without some kind of coding skills. All right. As we said before, you'll definitely look at bridging the gap between the testing team and the developers. Right? Communication will be at an all-time high, and you will have that deeper understanding of the application under test. It's something you should probably just get started with immediately. Right? You want to look at the leader of the team and understand what's on your personal growth plan. Most people are experimenting with multiple tools right now. A lot of projects, a lot of teams will have a complete autonomous choice of the framework that they choose. And sometimes it'll be a front-end developer lead that's taking that decision. Sometimes it'll be a test manager. Sometimes it's the architect. But you must invest continually in your skills. If you're going to add value to your team, now's the time to do it. Okay, start coding. Right? Kids in school now are learning this almost as a core subject, all right, alongside maths and science and all that good stuff. Coding is now becoming a core subject at a very early stage, certainly in the UK anyway. All right, so you want to future-proof your career, lock in your future opportunities for your future self by starting to embrace it now. Okay, make it part of your skill set, and AI is there to potentially help you. But the thing with AI, use it but verify, trust but verify. All right, it's not going to be right all the time, and you will ask a certain question, you'll get a certain answer, and you need to be very confident that what you're being told is, firstly, that it's correct, secondly, that it's correct in terms of the way you wish to use it within your code potentially. But it can be a great tool to accelerate that learning journey for you. All right. So you don't need to write code daily, but having those skills, understanding it, will definitely ensure that you can contribute more effectively within your Agile team. And Agile is all about now. It's all about this current sprint. All right, and how you can improve sprint on sprint. Everything about Agile is about how we can be more effective, how we can improve, and that can include your personal skill set as part of that journey as well. All right. So yeah, there we go. Now's a good time. Okay, let's look at my basic web app. Okay, so with my new friend GPT, I wanted to create something very quickly that we could use as a real world working example. Okay, so I asked for a basic HTML name and address form with a submit button. All right, here it is, kind of thing we have all seen, we've all tested at some point in our lives. Okay, I had some basic requirements, so I put myself in the product owner at this point. So apply the following validation that takes effect at submission stage. So we have a button to submit that. And if triggered, throws an error that references the field in question and which part of the validation did not pass. Okay, so it's created, it's written me some code. It's client-side JavaScript validation, detailed error messages for each field, specific validation rules for each input. So more specifically, we have first name and last name validation on length and spaces. We have street address validation between 5 and 100 characters, letters, numbers, and basic punctuation. Allowed city, 2 to 50 letters, spaces and hyphens allowed. State, 2 uppercase letters, US state abbreviation, zip code, etc., etc. Error messages to appear directly under each field. Prevents the form submission if any validation fails. All right. So if you like, these were my basic requirements. Then I also said, add some other types of validation to 3 of the fields, but don't tell me exactly what it's doing. Just mark the code as extra validation 1, validation 2, etc. The point of that is that I want to be able to look at the code and kind of decipher, firstly see if I see anything extra, of course, and decipher what it is it's doing, because strictly speaking, it wasn't an explicit requirement, and it's just to highlight the example of where our code awareness or our coding skills that we're building can help us with our test case design, our test strategy, if you like. So here's my form. Let's have a quick play with that. So John Smith, I'm not too worried about putting anything of relevance in here. I just want to throw some errors and see what happens when I don't meet those validations in different ways. Okay. I think it said something like special characters in the last name, maybe not. Street address must be 5 to 100 characters, letters, numbers, basic punctuation. Anyhow, you get the idea. Here's our form. So if we look at the code that was actually written to produce that form, here's the HTML file in question. We've got some elements and some DOM attributes there. These are the kind of things we might be hooking into if we were writing automated tests against this form. So I might be looking for a text field here that has an ID of first name, or a div ID of first name error for the error that gets thrown against it if I fail the validation. So these are the kind of things that are useful from an automation point of view. But let's just look at what the code's doing. All right, so we've got some basic things around the submission of itself. But let's start to look at the validation side. So it's helpfully commented the code along the way where I asked it to let us know what's going on. So first name validation. We declare a first name element and a first name error. And then we can say we have this if condition here. So I can start to understand, I've got a useful error message there, and I also gave it the requirement, of course, so I should know exactly what this is doing, and my error message, if it's triggered, will tell me that as well. So the first name must be between 2 and 50 letters and spaces only. So this is quite simply a regex here that is going to ensure that that condition is met. It's going to look at the value that's entered, it's going to apply that regex, and if that condition is not met, it will throw that error. All right. And of course, another way you can look at that, if you were to look at something in this case like regex 101, this is the regex that would need to match. So if I have a sensible name like John Smith, then I get a match against that regex. If I go less than 2 characters, for example, then I don't get a positive match. All right, and that's how the regex is designed to work. So that's we get a simple understanding of this simple form and the simple validation of how it will be implemented. Now, I asked it to create me some extra validations. So what we're about to see now was not a requirement. So actually, can I now understand this with my code knowledge to then say, this is actually in the code, it wasn't a requirement, but it now becomes something that I actually want to test against. Okay, so we're declaring a constant here, extra validation 1 result, and that is calling a function here, extra validation 1. It's passing through, as we can see, the first name value that's been entered in that field. So if I click, and quite simply what we're saying is, if the extra validation 1 result is not valid, we will declare is valid to be false. All right, so let's just look at specifically what that function does. All right, so do my code skills that I have allow me to start to understand this extra validation in the code that strictly wasn't a requirement. So here's the function, extra validation 1. We've passed through the first name value. Within that function, a blacklist array, a constant called blacklist, is being declared as an array. It has 4 values within it. These values are admin, user, test, and guest. So by virtue of the fact it's called blacklist, I can start to understand what it might be doing or what the intention of it may be. Okay, so if someone, my initial thoughts here is someone enters a username or a first name of admin, user, test, or guest, I probably don't want that to allow that to be the case. So if the blacklist, if the array here includes the value of the field as it's been entered in lowercase format, so apply lowercase formatting to it, then return an object where valid is being declared as or is being assigned as false, and we then get a message of this name is not allowed. All right, so let's just quickly go and test that out. Now I didn't deduce that from the requirements because it wasn't a requirement. But if I now submit that, let's just do a refresh. Let's just make sure all the other fields are populated with something as well. There we go. I get the error message that this name is not allowed. Okay. Well, it wasn't a requirement, but it's something I've only been able to deduce by having some kind of code knowledge, access to the code and the ability to walk through. All right, so very simply, let's look at the other ones as well. So there's a second extra validation. Where's that being called up here? Let's look for extra validation 2. There we go. Extra validation 2 results. So extra validation 2, this is being called with a street address. So it's something that's targeted at the first line of the address. Okay, so there's a pattern here. So we have a constant. Forbidden patterns is an array that contains 3 values: PO box, care of, or CO, or care of. And as you can see here, it then doesn't take much to apply the same kind of critical thinking logic. So if this forbidden pattern array includes the value or the item that has been entered in the first line of the address in my form, then the same thing. I want to return valid as being false, and I want to throw an error message of invalid address format. So when I then submit my form and valid is set to false anywhere within the code, but particularly here, then that form submission wouldn't be allowed to continue. Just finally, similar kind of thing. Let's have a look. We've got validation 3 will be being called somewhere. Here it is. Let's find that. So extra validation 3 is something that's being done with a state as the value that's being checked. Now this is applying it slightly differently. It's saying, okay, your valid states are actually an array containing however many valid 2-character states. So we're negating that now. We're simply saying if the valid states array doesn't include the value that I've entered in that state form, that field within the form, in that situation, I'm going to return false and throw an error message. So if I put ZZ, for example, and I submit that form, I would expect to see this not a valid US state abbreviation, and valid would be returned as false, and I wouldn't be able to submit the form. Now, the point being, none of these were requirements from me as a product owner when I was asking someone to build me that app. But my awareness of the code has allowed me to design some extra test scenarios to exercise those lines of code that have formed part of the application that I see before me that I need to test effectively. So it goes to show that you have this awareness of the code. You can certainly increase your test coverage, be more effective with your testing, and coming back to the idea of knowing the product, knowing the requirements, knowing how the customer is likely to use the application, but also knowing or having a more detailed understanding of the code. There are at least 3, if not 6 scenarios there that I possibly wouldn't have thought to have designed, or specifically wouldn't have designed because they weren't requirements, that could have been problematic because actually it's part of the code makeup. But now I've seen the code, I understand the code, I can design tests accordingly. So hopefully that's a good kind of real world example of where this becomes practical. All right, so we'll wrap it up there today, guys. Thank you for your time. It's a huge topic, right? It's a big topic. It's something that's hotly debated. It has always been and will always be. But quite simply, I think in summary, there's only things to be gained as a tester from learning some basic coding skills, most likely through the use of coded automation frameworks to start with. You can increase your future earning potential, your future job opportunities, the types of jobs that and the roles that you might look to step into. You can add more value in your team. You can lead better by example by, if you're in a senior role, by being able to do what you're asking other people on your team to do as well. And I think in general testing terms, you can find gaps, you can be more effective with your testing, and you can also enhance your exploratory testing with that code awareness. So I only see good things from learning to code. It has to be balanced, of course. You have a job on the team to do as a tester, and there will be times that you get to invest in yourself and start to build these skills. But it's not going to be just in your interest. It's going to be in the interests of the wider team, the project, and also your organization. So I would talk to your manager about developing a program for yourself that allows you to make these strides forward. Okay, it'll be well worth it. Okay, thanks for your time, guys. We'll see you next time. Cheers.